All
What's
right.
up? How are you doing, Prabhleen?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm so excited to chat with you. It was so fun getting to know you in our pre-interview and just so psyched to hear your experience on the Humane World for Animal. They used to be Humane Society of the United States. They actually just did a rebrand, but
Hmm.
Humane World for Animals put out a scorecard. It's a
Yeah,
sustainability scorecard on plant-based dining and sustainability initiatives. They ranked a bunch of schools, and your school, Berkeley, UC Berkeley, right?
go
Am I saying it
Bears.
correctly? Go
Yes.
Bears. So UC Berkeley ranked seventh on the list, which is
Yeah,
wild. Like we had some schools like University of Colorado Boulder, North Texas, University of North Texas, University of Texas, University of Michigan, where my sister went to school. And then number seventh on the list with a pretty high score, UC Berkeley.
UC
So I'm excited
Berkeley.
to chat about your experience there. But before we get into that, tell me a little bit introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah. Hey everyone. My name is Prabhleen. I attended UC Berkeley. I graduated December 2023 with a degree in microbial biology and a minor in public policy. At UC Berkeley, I was part of the Housing and Dining Sustainability Organization. So I was right there working with dining halls and like the dining and residence halls, working to make, you know, Berkeley a more sustainable campus. And there were a lot of different initiatives that we ran while I was at Housing and Dining, and which are also being run now, like the Plant Forward Recipe Challenge, and a lot of different initiatives that we're setting up to introduce more vegan options to students at Berkeley and, just make the campus a greener place to be.
Yeah, that's incredible the work that you've been doing. It was so cool getting to hear about it in our lead up to this conversation. And it's amazing how many different schools are doing stuff like this. Like the Humane Society, they reached out to, I think it was like 39. So they sent surveys to 39 schools in June
Mhm.
of 2024, gave them 2 months to submit it, and then 26 completed the survey. HSUS, or Humane World for Animals, now focused on schools with the largest undergrad populations that have self-operating dining programs and are not contracted with a food service management company. So that's a clear distinction in how most schools operate, which is they go through a big corporation. The big corporation provides everything, and there's very limited options outside of negotiations with those big schools. And what HSU has found is that 1/3 of colleges and universities surveyed for the scorecard reported impressive sustainability goals with well-defined strategies to effectively reduce their environmental footprint from food emissions. So they had
Mhm.
common strategies, including regular staff training for the culinary experts there on preparing and serving more plant-based items, as well as including carbon emissions data on their menu, which I saw that Berkeley did do. They had a little scorecard. It
Yeah.
was the let's see right here. It was they use a stoplight logo system on the menu.
Mhm.
So, had you seen this stoplight logo system? Like, were you aware of this going into Berkeley, or was it kind of like, oh, what's the stuff I have to get used to in my dining hall?
Yeah, so I think I remember this from freshman year. Obviously my memory is a little foggy, especially because we had the pandemic right in my sophomore year. So,
Right on.
yeah,
Not just normal freshman year fog of
yeah.
partying and getting.
No, oh, no, no. Yeah, yeah. So we had the pandemic right then, but I do remember seeing the sustainability, like the stoplight system, and seeing like, oh, what does this, red, yellow, green system mean? Next to the plant-based options, or like the vegetarian options, you'll see, green or yellow, and then when you get to like kind of like the meat options, you'll see like a red. It says CO2 and there's like a little bubble around it. And I don't know if it affected my food choices per se or a lot of students' food choices. I think it was just, maybe I have a different perspective of it because I worked in housing and dining and I was aware of like the initiatives that were in, I'm paying more attention to it. But it's really, students who are interested in sustainability will look at that and, make some food options accordingly, but I don't know if it was as affected for the general population because, you're just going in hungry and
Yeah, for sure.
eating whatever you can find in the dining halls.
And eating what you're used to and hoping that the dining hall just happens to serve whatever I had back at home.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely.
Yeah, and that's wild because I'm sure a lot of people growing up, they're pretty disconnected from the fact of animal agriculture being responsible for more than three-quarters of agricultural land use, like
Mhm.
11 to 20% of greenhouse gas emissions, and more than 30% of global methane emissions. So
Yeah.
having this sort of indicator system is probably really enlightening for a lot of folks because if you look at
Yeah.
the broad category, you see like, wow, these like plant forward, fiber rich foods have all this green scorecards onto it and they're dramatically less resource intensive, lead to less emissions, etc.
Mhm.
Um, were you aware of these sort of differences related to sustainability going into university? Or is this something that you've just kind of known for a while and really drove a lot of your interest? Because you seem incredibly motivated, obviously very knowledgeable on this stuff. But how did that journey start for you? Were you aware? Like, walk me through, how this interest in food systems started.
So I was always a little bit interested in food systems because I grew up in Yuba City, which is a very agricultural town. You know, we are uh, the largest independent peach grower in America actually is from here, the Darsing Bands. And we just have, we have our roots in agriculture. So it's funny because in my senior year of high school, I actually wrote an essay about Yuba City's history and its strong connection with agriculture. And, my dad was a seasonal farm laborer and my mom works in a prune factory. So every summer, I had like, there were little stalls that sold fresh strawberries, fresh blueberries, farmers markets. So I had this appreciation for fresh fruits and vegetables. And I think I was more um, interested in, vegetable kind of fruit and vegetable agriculture, not as much animal agriculture, because I think that's more concentrated in the Midwest, right? And I think it was really with my affiliation with the New Roots Institute that I really learned about what animal agriculture is. Growing up in California, I heard a lot about rights for migrant farm workers and was part of programs in school designed for students that are whose parents work as farm laborers, right? But I didn't know a lot about animal agriculture and how much waste it, you know, how much waste is included in that, how resource intensive it is, and how animals are treated during animal agriculture. I grew up Sikh, right? So that's a religion where meat is kind of looked down upon because you are hurting another soul for your own consumption. So I grew up vegetarian, but it goes far beyond animal welfare, in my opinion, because it affects people, it affects communities, in the sense that the way animals are being fed and treated in these large, factory farms, it's just not healthy. They don't have space to move around. They don't have space to breathe. They have tons and tons of illnesses that are then passed through the people who consume those foods. So you have a lot of outbreaks and diseases. So, I can't, in my experience, I haven't seen, people who care about animals and people who care about animal welfare. It's a no-brainer. Factory farming is not something that is good for the welfare of animals. But for people who don't have an interest in that, I would say that it still majorly affects the environment. It still, provides a lot of meats that aren't, up to standards and up to grade. And, it affects everybody in one way or another.
Yeah, and we see that now. So we're recording this in 2025. There's a big avian flu outbreak.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
The bird flu going on, and a lot of people are getting awareness about how the egg production process is, how food production is going about. But it takes these larger societal issues and these large outbreaks to really raise awareness about it. It's not really a part of everyday life. Most people aren't
Mhm.
growing up near where their, prunes and peaches come from. They're growing up in cities, they're growing up in suburban environments, and they're incredibly disconnected from their food. And a lot of people, when they see the various food options that are available, they think of meat as strictly a protein source.
Yeah.
They associate meat with protein. And what's wild is that the majority of people are actually getting enough protein, and plants are an incredibly protein rich source. And they have a added benefit of a tremendous amount of fiber. So 93% of people are walking around just fiber deficient.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the recommended daily amount is about 25 grams, 30 grams. Um, and when you combine those two things, the protein component and the fiber component, it makes plants an incredibly interesting and nutritious option for the standard American diet. And when you also factor in the sustainability component, it gets even more fascinating because you see it is such a dramatic reduction in impact negatively on the planet, from animal welfare to pollution to overspraying of pesticides and so many elements. And that trickles down into our food systems. So Berkeley, it seems like, is one of the food systems where or Berkeley has a food system where they're not contracted, as the report said, by a large institution. Is that what you experienced? Or are there large institutions that you still worked with on campus, or that you saw operating on campus?
So, I think my junior year it was, we had this whole, anti-Tyson campaign. Tyson, the company that provides most of our, chicken sources, most of our chicken nuggets,
Hmm.
which were a school favorite, by the way.
Yeah.
But it's Tyson, it's a big corporation that we were affiliated with, and a lot of the animal welfare groups were advocating against it. And you know, this is something that a lot of campuses have to keep in mind, is that you have to find the balance between feeding all of your students and doing that as efficiently and effectively as possible, and then being as sustainable as possible. So sometimes what happens is these large corporations and factory farming in general, it's very, you know, it produces a lot of food, there's the amount of food and the amount of meat and milk that's produced by these industries, they're enormous. I mean, I think in the 1980s there was this big underground cheese vault that Reagan, I don't know, have you
Yeah.
heard about
There
the
still are
government
cheese
cheese?
vaults that exist right
Yeah.
now.
Because there's just an excess of production, and the dairy industry is actually, you know, losing money because of how much milk that it's actually producing. So we actually were able to break away from Tyson, and that is not a big company that we're affiliated with anymore. And I'm so proud of what UC Berkeley is doing. We're partnering with a lot of local uh, food organizations. Like, we source our tofu from Hodo Soy, which is
Hmm.
also, a local organization. I think it's based in Oakland. Maybe I'll look more into that, but I think it's based in Oakland.
Yeah, it's based over
And
in Oakland.
yeah, based in Oakland. See, okay. And there's, for our fruits and vegetables, we also source it from, try our hardest to source it from local shop or local organizations. I think we also are partnered with Mary's Chicken, so we have decided and we have made like a conscious decision to, first of all, partner with local organizations that are treating their workers well, and giving money to orgs that can feed back into the local community and enrich it in that way, and also organizations that aren't, you know, engaging in these big factory farming processes, which will be a struggle, but we've already made so much progress. I mean, breaking away from Tyson was, I think, a big, big deal. And I was able to be on campus and see, the stickers that the animal welfare organizations were making, and the protests that were happening in Sproul Hall at Sproul Hall. So, it was really exciting to be there while that was happening.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be. And being so passionate and seeing progress being made feeds more progress. So,
Yeah,
like
definitely.
what role do you think student voices play in shaping plant-based menu offerings? Because in the report, it stated that UC Berkeley ranks among the top schools providing plant-based dining, aiming for 50% plant-based meals by 2027. And the report highlights specific sustainability goals, including reducing animal protein purchases and offering plant-based proteins by default. They note successful campaign strategies like the culinary training that I mentioned and the carbon emissions data. Um, and additionally, the report suggests that some universities have more ambitious sustainability goals than others,
Yeah.
which is absolutely amazing that so many universities are taking this effort. But where is this effort being driven from? Is it the universities themselves, the administrators, the professionals who are working there that are driving it? Is it the students? Is it a combination of both? So curious what you think of the role of students. What role do they play in creating more plant-based options?
Yeah, students play a big role, as especially at UC Berkeley. I think student voices, I mean, there is kind of a reputation that UC Berkeley has, we're the protest school. We were, and you can take it whatever way you want to. Maybe I'm biased because I went to Berkeley and I'm, proud to be an alum. But, from the 1960s, we were advocating for free speech, and we really led the initiative during that time period. And I see that continuing till present day. So, in 2010, actually, like the director, I think, executive director of New Roots Organization, Monica Chen, there was a Panda Express that was going to be built around campus, near campus. And in 2010, a lot of students advocated against that, saying that we need more nutritious options that serve the students. And you know, we don't want these big kind of fast food joints to take over, our school. And we were back in 2010. I say we because Berkeley, but the
You're
students
definitely
at
part
that
of it
yeah, not in 2010, but
in
yeah,
spirit.
in spirit, I was there. Yeah, back in 2010, they were actually able to stop the Panda Express from being built, and that gave birth to the Berkeley, I think, yeah, Berkeley Food Collective. So it's a grocery store run by Berkeley students, where you could go and purchase, fresh fruits and vegetables. It accepts EBT, and there's also a pay what you can option. And so that was, a big um, example of how student voices can shape what's going on at UC Berkeley. And even until now, like present day in 2025, we're continuing that. So I talked a little bit about the anti-Tyson campaign. That was all student led. And, I am grateful that our higher ups actually listen to student voices because we're loud and we don't, really take no for an answer. Um, it's a really there's a really big, protest and advocacy community, the culture built here at UC Berkeley. And I have seen that if, we want something to get done, it will happen because, we're partnered with so many local organizations now. We aren't partnered with Tyson anymore. We, have plant-based milk options at our dining hall, which wasn't there when I was a student. And the Plant Forward Recipe Challenge also started after my freshman year of college. And we worked with the Better Food Foundation, uh, the organization I work for, Housing and Dining Sustainability, partnered with, Better Food Foundation to create kind of the Plant Forward Recipe Challenge because students were advocating for more plant-based options in dining hall. And now we made the pledge And by 2027, hopefully we have 50% plant-based options in our dining halls. It's just student voices are being heard at Berkeley, and I think they will continue to be heard.
Yeah, no doubt about it. If there's one thing students have done historically, it is let their voice be heard. If they see things that they want changed, they have no shortage of time to try to make it happen. And you
Definitely.
mentioned the Plant Forward Recipe Challenge, and the Humane World for Animals report described it. It's a challenge. It's biannual, and dining hall chefs compete to create the most popular plant-based dish. Have you tasted? Did you participate? Tell me about how that was for you?
Yeah, I was tabling during that event. So, because I worked with housing and dining. So, we would set up our little table outside the dining halls. We would have the plant-based option on a plate. And before students went into the dining halls, we would kind of ask, look out for this meal that's being served. It's plant forward. It's created by our head chef, whoever the head chef at your dining hall is. And well, so yeah, I will get into how it, affected students and, what the student, feedback was. But because we worked with the dining services so directly, I loved seeing how the head chefs were able to use their creativity and go back to some of the best recipes that they've tasted as like even children, as children to create like their own original recipe. It was great for the chefs and they got really into the competition aspect of it. I remember there was like I wasn't in at Berkeley during this time, but there was like this uh plant forward meal that was actually inspired by depression era, like the Great Depression era meals that they had, and it was like this, fabulous take on I think it's something like with green beans and potatoes, but it looked amazing, and it was so cool to see that little description that the chef had wrote. My grandmother, she like survived the Great Depression, and this is something that we would eat when we were children. And it's so cool when food tells a story, and that's something that I saw during this plant forward recipe challenge. And so some of the recipes I tried, one of my favorite ones that I still remember to this day is they made like a spiced hummus bowl. It was amazing. Like I still think about it. They're just like, and the spiced hummus, like they made it in the dining hall. So like their own tahini and chickpea blend, all the spices, and I remember tabling for that event. Students were coming out of the dining hall saying, "Why don't you make food like this more often? We want this food." Because presentation is a big part of it too. It was served in a little bowl. It felt like you were, like at Chipotle or some kind of high-end plant forward, nutrition shop. It seemed like you got a bowl from there. And students were really receptive to that. And I love seeing, and you know what? Most of the students who tried this option, they weren't even plant-based. Like they weren't vegan. They were like, "No, I love meat, but this was amazing." So there's a lot of, positive impact that this challenge has had. And I really liked being a part of it, tabling, and I really liked talking to the students and hearing that they went from dining hall to dining hall, kind of following this recipe challenge, because it happens biannually. It happens once a week during the lunch period. So we have 4 dining halls. Each dining hall does their plant forward challenge once a week. So that means as a student, you can go to all 4 dining halls in at lunch and then try all of the recipes. And a lot of students would follow it and then vote for what their favorite was.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, and it reminds me, so I live in Fort Collins, Colorado, and, every so often, maybe, like, once a quarter or something, they'll do a night where certain restaurants will be giving out free samples, and folks kind of just do their rounds, and not only do you get the opportunity to try new foods, you get the opportunity to try foods that the chefs are really passionate about creating, but you also get to have a unique and novel experience related to food and be able to tell the story of that food. I think what you mentioned about loving food that tells the story is really powerful because when you are creating a food system, you're not just satisfying nutritional requirements. It's not scientific like that. It's emotional. It's these foods remind me of this experience. These foods remind me of this place, this person. This smell reminds me of this experience. It's a really whole body sensory experience. And being able to do that well, especially when it is sustainable, it's good for the planet, it's good for our body, it's good for our family. That is really, really exciting. And for such a challenge to exist, allows the chefs to get out of that normal routine of serving, quote unquote Taco Tuesday, just doing their tacos because it's every Tuesday and alliteration is a thing, but rather giving them a chance to explore their culinary expertise in a new way and to introduce the students to have new experiences and create that story of food at this university. Or Balance works a lot with K through 12 institutions. So we work a lot with elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and try to encourage more fiber rich options. And the chefs and food service directors at those institutions, they say the same thing when they are getting to try new plant based options, ones that are fiber rich, getting to introduce a new hummus, which is wildly fiber packed. Like, I did a quick look and it's like 1 cup of hummus is like 15 grams of fiber in it. And
Mhm.
if you're eating hummus with
Yeah.
chips, I'm probably eating about a cup, let's be honest.
Yeah.
So it's like you're getting this injection of quality nutrients and sensory experience and making memories with friends doing that tour around.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, tell me more about some of the people you worked with over these experiences because, one student can inspire, but it takes many students and it takes many voices working together. What were some of those experiences like? What are some of the lessons you learned working with others and advocating for more plant-based options?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, first of all, just to kind of recap on food being more like of an experience and how food can remind you of, your childhood and, different things. It kind of reminds me of that, scene in Ratatouille where he tries the ratatouille and it takes it back. That is exactly, the kind of experiences that bring that give kind of a novelty experience to students in dining halls. And I think the plant forward recipe challenge, like, the chefs creating something that was super, close to their heart really, exemplified that scene. And, it's a very relatable. I know it's a Disney movie, but it's a really relatable scene. Yeah, but sorry, your question was.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I
it
mean,
just
I
reminded
appreciate
me of that, so like I had to throw
totally.
that in
Well,
there.
because conversely, I mean, you bringing up Panda Express reminded me of late nights outside of the university going to Panda Express or other, like, not the most healthy option
Yeah,
places where, it's food you eat. It might taste good in the moment, but you feel terrible in the hours and day leading
definitely.
after. Um,
A
so
lot of
yeah,
late
so
night Taco Bells.
yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh, the midnight menu. So my question was, as you're going and doing this advocacy,
Mhm.
one person is incredibly inspiring. We know these individual figures throughout history who are credited with being, drivers and innovators of change. But it's not just one person who made that happen. It was many, many people. So
Yeah.
what I was curious about is your experience in working with folks, maybe at the housing opportunity, or just what lessons did you learn in collaborating with others to advocate for change related to plant-based options?
Yeah, I had such a great opportunity to work with so many amazing people. The current boss of housing, kind boss, or like the director of housing and dining sustainability now, Shannon Casey. She's who I worked under my senior year, and it was a change from Samantha LeBeau, who now works for Stanford University at their sustainability department. And there they are both such strong leaders who are take so much initiative to make things happen, and I'm so inspired by both of them. I mean, Shannon, kind of created like an internship program with the Housing and Dining Sustainability organization where student interns can kind of make a project, based on a topic in sustainability or the environment that they're passionate about and present it in a panel. That's something that wasn't there before. And I've seen how hard she worked and how much change that she's created, and, it wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for people like her and everyone else that I worked with at H&DS. My peers that I worked with, the students and the interns, they are so motivated and have so much knowledge about food systems. And it's a really plant forward, plant-based community. By that, I mean they're really interested in plants as well. So we would, exchange gardening tips. We would talk about the different house plants that we're growing, and it was a really positive and upbeat community. Sometimes when we think about, like the vegan space or the plant-based, space, there's there needs to be more joy in that area just because it could be so disheartening thinking about what conditions animals are facing and how passionate a lot of people are about that. And sometimes it might be, I don't want to say a little negative, but it is just heavy on your heart to think about, what's happening right now with animal welfare. But what I experienced was a very positive, uplifting community who understood that, sometimes when you go to the marina, you like, indulge in seafood now and then. And that doesn't mean that you're not a strong and committed person to animal advocacy. That just means, this is a food that you grew up enjoying and, you felt like eating. It's an open community, a non-judgmental community. And that's what I really appreciated with the peers that I work with. And I think it just makes this movement more welcoming to people who may not necessarily be plant-based or vegan, but care about things like factory farming and, animal welfare and sustainability. And I really liked that. I really liked everybody I worked with. I like how much initiative everyone took, and there was a huge, community aspect of, you're never doing something alone, because what we're doing is we're planning events. The main job of ours were to plan events that, got students interested or table and advocate for sustainability and get the campus involved in, sustainability challenges. So it's very, community based. There's a lot of, conversations that you have with different students. And when you're tabling with a peer, you learn how to have an effective conversation, to have a conversation that produces results, and by results, I mean, signing a pledge to use less use reduce your water usage or reduce your energy usage. The Cool Campus Challenge was one that Housing and Dining Sustainability had back when I was working there, and or the Weigh Your Waste challenge, where we would go to students and we would, weigh their waste. So after they were done with their foods at the dining hall, we would, section off, uh, the waste that they had, and then we would use that data and present to the Office of Sustainability, um, in an effort to make the campus more sustainable. But, going up to people and talking to people and convincing them to, sign something, fill out a Google form, you have to be very positive and accepting and open to do that kind of work. And those were the kind of people that I was surrounded by. And, those are the lessons that I've learned. I've learned, even though someone might not have the same mission as you can find common ground and have a great conversation and maybe a few months later, maybe when you're not there, you'll see that conversation having you could that conversation will have an influence on their life. Um, and yeah,
Yeah, it gets back into, the interest in plants and planting seeds. And,
yeah,
some seeds take a while to grow.
yeah,
You can
definitely.
water them. Seems like nothing's going to come up. But then all of a sudden, that seed that you planted, that information, that conversation, that dish that
Yeah,
they have it again in the future. They think about it, and it
definitely.
influences their decision in the future. And I would like that you bring up the weigh your waste challenge, because a big component of our food system is there's the production side of it, some,
Mhm.
overproduction, but then there's also a waste component of it too. Because in the United States, about 30 to 40% of all food that is produced is simply wasted. It amounts
Yeah,
to about like 133 billion pounds of food. And if our institutions aren't producing food that students enjoy, that they like, that they're going to eat, it goes from the worker to the tray to the trash. That's
mhm,
the pipeline for 30 to 40%. So, by producing a diverse variety of meals, incorporating a higher amount of plant based options so that folks do get a diversity of choice, it can also have an impact on the amount of waste reduction, because then students are actually eating the food that shows up on their plate. And I
definitely,
think that
yeah,
that is really important as well, because there are guidelines that universities have. I know in K through 12, there's a lot of USDA food guidelines that food service directors have to follow, certain nutrition requirements, and making sure that the foods that are available that satisfy those nutrition requirements are delicious and that they don't end up right in the trash. It's such an important piece of this. And
yeah.
did you happen to notice that, I don't know, in the course of your time doing that weigh your waste, that any of the changes that were made related to increasing plant-based options had a reduction in waste, or was your time doing that just more data collection and you didn't really get to see a full lifespan of the experiment evolve?
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't think during the plant forward recipe challenge, I don't think that intersected with the weigh your waste challenge. So I don't, you know, I didn't get to see that aspect of that. But what I did see when I was working for the Weigh Your Waist challenge is the student reaction. So when the student hands you their plate of half-eaten food, and then you start dumping it and sorting it out, and you actually see the amount of food that like students have wasted or left behind, you get a you know, they hand you the plate and you get a, "Oh, yikes," or "Sorry." So it's just a mental thing, that, affects students, and as I continued, the Weigh Your Waist challenge, I would see that more and more students who, came in to hand their waste, most of it like, there was a reduction in waste on the plates, and I think it's because we had these giant buckets of food showing how much food was wasted. So I saw the direct impact and, but as for, the plant for recipe challenge, I wasn't able to see that impact. That was more like, data collection and seeing, what different foods that students are enjoying versus not enjoying. And I think most of it just kinda had to do with, um did students, seeing a food, wanting to try it, liking it, not liking it, and that is what ends up as waste. Um, but yeah, I really did get to see that kind of immediate reaction of, maybe I shouldn't do this, or, I feel a little bit bad about throwing away, food.
Yeah, because probably never in their life had there been a check.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
But the simple acknowledgement of it and raising awareness that this is happening has an impact. It's like, calling
Yeah,
a spade, and then
yeah,
it becomes a spade. It's like we're showing this is how much food waste is happening. It's up to the student to determine if they're okay with it or not.
yeah, and
And when you,
yeah, sorry. You
oh
I
no,
don't
go
wanna
ahead.
interrupt you. No, I just wanted to bring up that there's, like, a big unhoused population at Berkeley as well. So, you can see kind of the effect that it had on students, especially when you walk out of your hall and you walk to your dorm and you see the unhoused population and you see how, there are a lot of people in Berkeley itself that don't have food. And it's not meant to guilt trip anybody, because sometimes, sometimes your eyes are bigger than your stomach, right? It's not to judge people, but, it is really something to be conscious about.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's so many aspects that are involved in our food system that make it a very complicated web of influence, reaction. And as we move forward into the future, by putting out sustainability scorecards, by doing, weigh your waste challenges, by doing the plant forward recipe challenges, we can start to identify those various impacts and how it reacts, such as like if folks are having their waste weighed, but there's an introduction of to-go boxes or a campaign saying, bring your own container to, take what you didn't need and eat it later, or,
Mhm,
gift it to those who might need it. There are tremendous opportunities for reducing waste, being more sustainable, and improving the health of us and those around us in our institutions. So,
mhm,
you know, a lot of the work at Berkeley and a lot of the work at many of these other universities is incredibly inspiring. It's definitely in the direction that I think is advantageous, where we have a food system that promotes nutrition, that promotes health versus harm. What's your vision for the future? What would you love to see food systems look like, whether it be at Berkeley or just the future generation of students that are in, United institutions in America?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much conversation around food systems in America, especially when you compare our food to other countries like the EU. There are a few food options here available in America that aren't even up to standards at the EU, like hot Cheetos. I mean, I think the way Americans think about food really definitely needs to change, because sometimes food is just viewed as a negative because you know how many chemicals and pesticides and um, you know uh, dangers are associated with overconsumption. And what I envision for the future, especially starting with universities where you know students have the ability to eat what they want instead of being at home and just eating whatever, their parents made for dinner that day. And when that shift happens, you automatically see students making healthier options because well, not all the time, because they are students and sometimes you have to rely on that ramen, but you finally have freedom to eat what you want. And, a lot of students say, well, I'm really interested in health, so I'm going to choose options that are, you know, fiber rich, nutrient dense, and, not as heavy in carbs and fats and preservatives. So, what I envision for the future of Berkeley specifically is, first of all, more plant-based options, because there's a big vegan community at Berkeley, and there's also a very large vegetarian community at Berkeley as well, who, constantly, um, from the students that I've spoken with in my experience as an undergrad and while working at Berkeley with housing and dining sustainability and getting input from a lot of different students, that, they wish there were more, vegan and vegetarian based options in the dining halls. So definitely implementing more of that. I love the direction that Berkeley is going in already, local organizations providing food instead of, big corporations that, don't really care about that might not care as much about worker rights and, the rights of the animals that are being used as food. And yeah, I think we're already making tremendous progress in that area. And one thing I think that's kind of unique about Berkeley is when I was working in housing and dining, I was working as a garden coordinator. And we actually, especially at Clark Kerr, which is a dining no, a housing, uh, sorry, why am I forgetting the word? A on-campus residential hall, sorry, I don't know why that slipped my mind. It's a
All good.
residential hall. There's a garden associated with it, and they grow lemon trees, and lemon trees grow in that garden, and, I actually got the opportunity, when I was working in housing and dining to make lemonade for the students at Clark Kerr. So, it's if I could like, the future of Berkeley, if it could be students actually, working to produce their own food, that would be amazing. I mean, there's a new, residential hall called Anchor House where we have a rooftop garden, and there are students that work there and, work to produce, work in, to for fresh produce, and students are actually able to, see the food that they're eating grown in their gardens and dining halls. We distributed a lot of the food from our gardens to, the Berkeley Student Food Collective and other organizations. If the f I am excited for the future, um, especially because what I would like to see in the future, I mean, is, students growing their own food. I think that would be an amazing and sustainable way, and I think it would also get students more attached to the food they're eating and kinda take pride in their meals because they had a part in growing and sustaining their meals.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about the getting the opportunity to grow up in Yuba City, being close to where your food was produced, and we briefly talked about how for the majority of people that's just not the case. And by getting exposed to the work that goes into producing your food, the techniques, the amount of effort, it gives you a renewed sense of appreciation. So you do think twice when you have half of a, let's say watermelon slice or something, and you grew the watermelon. You're like, do I really want to just pitch this after I worked so hard to make it?
Yeah.
And because you know how delicious it is. So having a future where folks get to be more involved in their food system can have this renewed sense of appreciation. And in the K through 12 side, because we're talking specifically universities, we see that tremendously, especially when students are introduced to the scratch cooking process as opposed to prepackaged frozen meals and getting sourced from local farms and having that, quote unquote, farm to school lunch table connection. We see this like eureka moment pop off with students where they're like, oh, wow, a carrot grows in the ground. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yes.
it's like, of
And
course it does. It's like, no,
yeah.
like if you've only seen a carrot at the grocery store produce section, that's where you think a carrot comes from. You just might not make that connection if you aren't exposed to it. And it's not for like, just like ignorance or anything. It's just, you just never knew. I mean, it's just the
Yeah.
way that our food system is sort of in our face, masked, packaged, and hidden through
Mhm. Mhm.
branding, through grocery stores, and through the way that our housing systems are set up so far away from the farms and a lot of the rural area. Folks just don't get exposed. So, as we see more opportunities for students to work with food manufacturers, find out where their food is coming from, grow it themselves, I think it can only lead to a renewed appreciation and brighter future for how our food systems are developed thanks to that enhanced knowledge.
Yeah, definitely, and I've seen so much, you know, on social media regarding this. I mean, there was this one TikTok that went viral, about a woman who was growing a lemon tree in her or had a lemon tree in her backyard. And, she was talking to her friend, she was like, "Oh, I need a few lemons," and she was like, "Oh, just go to the tree in your backyard and get some from there." She was like, "I didn't know you could just pick fr" and this was, a woman in her 20s. She's like, "I didn't know you could just pick fruit and eat it, like, don't you have to do something to it first?" And it just shows how disconnected a lot of Americans are from, food that are grown even in their backyards because everything is, like, really produced and manufactured here. And you start to see food that way as well instead of something that's, regenerative and something that you can have a connection to, something that you can grow and cultivate.
Yeah, 100%. So, you mentioned earlier about your background in microbiology. My background is in biology and chemistry. So, I specifically focused on plant physiology and plant biology. And that was really illuminating that, wow, you can get basically all the nutrients that you need from plants. They grow just out in the open. Yes, they need water. Yes, they need sunlight, right soil, cultivation, all that good stuff. But for all intents and purposes, they just grow outside. And I thought it was so fascinating that as I started to get exposed to more food, I would recognize, like, oh, I can just eat an apple from a tree. Like, that's
Yeah.
something that you can do. You don't have to just rely on them from the grocery store. And then you start to think about like food co-ops, and you start to think about like CSA, like, and being able to go to local farms, support them, get a box of produce. There's now delivery services like imperfect produce where you can get sent ones that, quote unquote, aren't customer ready. They're not beautiful and they don't, sell at the grocery store, but they're just as nutritious, just as delicious, often probably sometimes more nutritious because they're like heritage stocks.
Hmm.
And there's such a vast ocean of opportunity when it comes to improving our food system. And it's incredibly encouraging, talking to folks like you who are on the ground doing the work and hearing about the stories that we're making. I also think about, how this conversation can influence anyone who's listening who might be interested in taking, putting their foot in the water of changing our food system. I was curious, what advice would you give to students at other universities who are looking to follow in your footsteps?
I would say, first of all, reach out and find a community of like-minded students because, you know, if you have an idea and a mission, that's amazing. But I saw the most change happen when you involve other people along who are mission oriented and aligned, and starting kind of a group or organization, and from there getting other students involved. Our animal welfare organization at Berkeley. They are a small community of like-minded individuals, but because, they're so passionate and so mission aligned, I've seen, the protests and the protests they've organized and the events they've created, and what a strong community and that comes from that, and then in turn how that influences actual change. If being part of a community and having other people to depend on and rely on, and also keep you accountable for taking initiative, it's invigorating, it's empowering, and it keeps you motivated to continuously do the work that you're doing. In advocacy spaces, sometimes you're dealt with people who don't have the same opinions as you, and when you have a community to kind of back you up, and when to remember that there are people who, think like you and want to see the same, uh, achievements and reach the same goals you do, it empowers you, and it doesn't, and then anything that you might perceive as negative doesn't affect you as much. And that's one thing that I saw while working in housing and dining, is when I would be tabling and I wouldn't get a lot of, signups one day, or when I would be flyering at Sproul. And if you're a UC Berkeley student, you are just walking through Sproul, you are inundated with so many flyers being passed out, and sometimes it could be overwhelming. When you're on the opposite side flyering and people aren't taking your flyers, it can also be overwhelming to you as well, saying, am I not making a difference? Am I not making an impact? But going back and speaking to people who are doing the same things that you are, you kind of take any sort of negative experience you can, and you move on, and you go out and try again, and you know what, you will find success. Like, even and then any achievement will start seeming like a big achievement, and it'll motivate you to do more and continuously campaign and advocate. So yeah, that would be my advice. Just find a community of people. Advocacy can be hard, especially when, maybe a lot of people don't agree with you, but, finding your community and being resilient is really, really helpful and important in this space.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was reminded of the quote. It was, success. It's a motivational speaker Zig Ziglar, and he said occurs when success occurs. Let me try this again. Success occurs when opportunity meets preparation. So a certain amount of preparation is needed. You've got to make those connections. You've got to learn your stuff, but then there's going to be an opportunity, and the opportunity will come if you try long enough and if you put yourself out there and you keep going. So it sounds like you'd encourage folks to, get involved locally, start making those connections and just get going with it.
Yeah.
Today's the day to start the rest of your life, right?
Yeah, and any small change that you make, recognize it as, something that you did, even if you change one person's mind or make, a small adjustment. All of these little achievements are, result in big changes. So, just be resilient and any kind of difference you can make is a big deal and something that, you accomplished on your own. So be proud in your work as well.
Amazing. That's a really motivational spot to end on. I just want to
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me, for sharing your experience, for giving me a deeper understanding because I saw this scorecard come out and I thought, wow, like this is incredible. We've got so many schools like Berkeley getting an A rating. What's it actually like on campus? So I appreciate you sharing your experience, talking about all the additional progress being made. Is there anything else you wanted to share? You want to plug? How could people connect with you if they wanted to get more involved in this space?
Yeah, so I want to plug New Roots Institute. It's a nonprofit organization that I'm working with currently, and they're actually accepting applications right now for their Summer Leadership Academy. I attended the Summer Leadership Academy. I loved it. I got to hear from so many speakers in, who are working in animal law. I got to this the founder of Veggie Grill also, we were able to speak to him as well. So really, if you want to get involved, the New Roots Institute, look it up. It's a great, organization. And yeah, just look, people who go to Berkeley, hopefully if any Berkeley students are watching this, Housing and Dining Sustainability, that's the organization that I worked with. Definitely plug. I think there's an internship application that's open right now. So definitely, apply to that. And yeah, just be, any contribution you can make is a big one. And yeah, I'm excited to see uh, you know, America move in a more plant forward, sustainability based direction.
Yeah, I certainly am too. And I can't say enough good things about New Roots Institute. They've been so generous and we've had so much great partnership with Balanced. It's been absolutely fantastic. So definitely go check out New Roots Institute, apply. Be sure to, like the video, comment what you thought about it, subscribe. And yeah, thank you so much, Prabhleen, for chatting with me.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation and getting to know a little bit more about you as well.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I can't wait to keep working together and make the world a better place.
Yeah, same here.